Today I'm making custom silicone molds from 3D resin printed masters. These are generally called squish molds or cap molds and are made in two parts. First, I need to make the lower half of the mold. The clear base is a 50mm diameter circle of Cricut transfer paper. It's sticky but easy to remove without leaving residue. Silicone will pick up any defects in the original die, including fingerprints, so cleaning them first is essential. I wear nitrile gloves and use isopropyl alcohol, or IPA, with a clean microfiber cloth to avoid leaving lint. Now I stick the bottom face of the die, usually the one side, to the transfer paper. We don't want silicone to touch this face. I use a glass pane from an inexpensive picture frame to have a flat surface. I need a form to pour the silicone into, so I'm using some 3D printed mold making forms from the Smith's Forge. I'll put a link below for those. Silicone usually comes in a two-part set, with the parts imaginatively called Part A and Part B. I'm using Siraya Defiant 15. It's a platinum-based silicone known to handle 3D printed masters well. It is mixed in a 1:1 ratio by weight. I'm mixing Part A and Part B with a handheld mixer with a plastic blade for easier cleanup. The pot life, or how long you have before it starts hardening, is about 15 minutes, so the mixer saves a little time. Mixing does introduce bubbles, so I put in a vacuum pot for 5 minutes to degas it. Now I pour the silicone into the molds. I'm trying to fill the molds from the bottom up with a slow, steady stream, avoiding the dice to keep bubbles from being trapped beneath them. I'm trying to cover the dice masters with about 15mm of silicone. I put the mold forms into a pressure pot insert, and then put the pressure pot insert into the pressure pot, and seal it up tightly. I connect it up to an air compressor and pressurize it to 3.5 atmospheres, or about 50 psi. We want a high pressure to eliminate any residual bubbles. Since I want to be able to cure resin at 2.5 atmospheres and don't want my molds to compress, I go a full atmosphere higher for the silicone. After the 4 to 6 hour cure time at 25 degrees Celsius, I remove the molds from the pressure pot and take them out of their forms. I remove the transfer paper off carefully, trying to avoid tearing the silicone. Sometimes a small amount of silicone gets on the die's face. I carefully cut off excess with an X-Acto knife, avoiding scratching the masters. We now have a complete bottom silicone mold. This mold has all the faces except for one. We need to make the top, or the cap, hence the term cap mold now. Silicone doesn't like to stick too much, but it wants to stick to itself. Since I will pour silicone on silicone, I'm spraying Smooth On Mold Release 200 onto the bottom molds. Clean the exposed faces with a cotton swab and a bit of IPA, being careful not to touch the silicone. I mix and pour another batch of silicone. I again avoid pouring on the face directly and target about 15 to 20mm of coverage, since I want a little weight to my mold tops to avoid raised faces when casting resin. Back to the pressure pot for a second cure at 2.5 atmospheres. 6 hours later, it's time to remove them. Separating the mold halves can be a little tricky, as some of the silicone from the top will be stuck to the bottom. I label the molds with a Sharpie here, but that's not really ideal as it doesn't stick well to silicone. I now use a Sharpie oil-based paint marker. Thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something. If you have any questions or suggestions, please put them in the comments.